Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our session on 990 compliance at both the state level and the local level. My name is JB Gall, and I am the Director of Partner Development for Omega Financial. One of Omega Financial's products is a website called File990.org, which helps nonprofits, makes it easy for them to know when to file their 990s, how to file, and makes it easy for them to do. So I am happy to be here with you today. I am joined with two fellow presenters, Matthew Tooker, who is the Director of Business Intelligence for Omega Financial and is the product leader, business leader for File990.org, and then Deb Stern, who is the state PTA treasurer or the treasurer for the Alabama State PTA. So she has great knowledge in working with her state group and her local groups in ensuring compliance, and we'll hear from them a little later on during our presentation. All right, so what we are going to talk to you about today and over the next 30 minutes is really the ins and outs of the 990. We'll look at the technology that's available for you to help ensure compliance with your local groups. We'll talk about the reinstatement process. So if a group is not compliant anymore, if their nonprofit status has been revoked, we'll talk about what needs to be done for them to regain status. And we'll explore the best practices that we have obtained from working with state PTAs over the last couple of years and their officers. And finally, we'll end with questions that we have for Deb. And then during the showing of this presentation, if you have any questions for us, then we'll be able to answer those. We know this is not an exciting topic, but it's very important to talk about tax compliance with your groups. We plan to make this as informative, as interactive as possible, so that you will leave this meeting feeling confident that you can speak about taxes with both your state board and with your local chapters. As a background, File990.org works with 15 state PTAs to help manage their tax compliance and make it easy for their local chapters to file. Okay, in 2007, the IRS gave notice to all nonprofits that they were going to change their regulations and said that every nonprofit had to file a 990 to report to the IRS that they were an organization and give some background of the revenue that organization receives. They also said that if you do not file for 3 consecutive years, then you risk being revoked. So there were some nonprofits or some, and this goes from the National Red Cross down to the local Little League. Those are all nonprofits and they all have a filing requirement. Now I should probably go back a step and saying, there are sometimes confusions between nonprofit organizations and tax exempt. Tax exempt really is handled state to state, but a non-profit, not-for-profit organization is a national designation given by the IRS. And what that really means is that income received from its members is not taxed. So income that your organization receives from its members, in your case, parents or things like that of the students of the school, then that's not taxable income. Other income that you receive through fundraising, other things like that could be taxed, but the vast majority of the income that we receive is not taxed, and that's what's the great benefit for being a nonprofit organization. So fast forward in 2010, a ton of letters were sent by the IRS to nonprofit organizations saying, you've been revoked because you haven't filed. So that was really a mess. I think there are probably some state PTAs that still have those 2010 notices of those chapters or local chapters that have not filed that they're still dealing with. And if you do, we hope to give you the information that you'll need to start on that today. So from a state level, so the next topic is corporate health, and that's kind of been a buzzword for the past 5 years that we've heard. And that means is the health, the compliance, the tax compliance of your state and its local chapters in a good health. It hasn't happened yet, but we feel that the IRS will someday come towards a parent organization. So that means the state PTA and its local components underneath it. If there are too many local components, say over 50%, that are revoked or not in good standing, that it could revoke the state PTA's nonprofit status, and even the chapters that have been doing the right thing and filing on time, their status too. So we don't want to see that happen. We certainly don't want it to happen to your state PTA. So we want to make sure the tax compliance of your state PTA and its local chapters is good. Again, it's the law. Just like if I don't file my personal taxes, there are penalties and fees that I must pay to make up for that, and it's the same for your chapter. So we want to make sure that we are setting a good example and following the law and our regulations and filing those returns. But we found, again, this is one of the best practices. If the state PTA doesn't prioritize it, if the treasurer or the president don't make it their priority, then the local leaders won't care because they don't understand it's something that they have to do. It's something that's a routine business item for them. So we feel, again, a good toolbox item for you is that you want to have a good corporate health and you want to make this a priority. All right. There are 3 different types of 990s that your groups will fall into. The vast majority of your chapters will file the 990N. And so this is an organization that has revenue up to $50,000. And so that's where a lot of your groups file. This filing used to be called the postcard, but it must, the only way to file it now is online. So groups could go to the IRS's website to file, but there are passwords and it's not very user intuitive. The IRS does have IRS authorized e-filers, which File990.org is one of. And so we provide a service that the IRS that we pass IRS standards and have access to their system to file reports. And we think that we make it very easy for chapters to file. The 990 EZ, which is a little bit confusing because in our personal life, the EZ is the easier form to fill out of the 1040 personal taxes, but this is really the second level. So this would be income of $50,000 to $200,000. So I would say this would be bigger schools who have a big fundraising presence. They likely would fall into the EZ category. A really big school or the state organizations likely are filing the Form 990. So this is what the National PTA files. This is what the National Red Cross files. So that's a big form that usually takes an accountant to file. Now, even there's a blog post that we've published, and Matthew can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think now the IRS has moved that EZ forms must only be e-filed now. They used to be able to file those by paper, but I think as of January 1st, EZ forms must be filed digitally now too. So that makes it important to have a good IRS e-filer that you trust to file those forms for your organizations. If for some reason a PTA would own property, for some reason, then they would, no matter what their income is, they likely would have to file the full 990. But again, the majority of your groups will be in the 990N category. Okay, so what is the Form 990? Again, the nonprofit tax return is a little bit different from our personal taxes. There are no taxes owed or a refund to be received. Now, you may owe something if you haven't filed and need to be reinstated or have penalties like that. But really, it's almost like a nonprofit census. The IRS wants to see that your organization exists and you are who you say you are. So it's really an informational return. You may, say how much income has been received by the organization, and with the EZ and the full 990, there is essentially a balance sheet that has to be input of your revenue and expenses, and then even compared to last year. But again, for the 990N, which most of your groups will file, there's two questions to answer. One, is our income at or under $50,000, and are we still in existence? So very simple to answer. Again, with the EZ, there are more questions to answer and some financial data that you must input. Now, there are people who try to fraud the system. At File990.org, we have had cases where people start fake nonprofits or try to file returns for these groups, and who knows what they're trying to do. But we have, had court cases where we've had to turn over those filings to the IRS or to the court to show, did they file, did they attempt to file, those types of things. So there are people watching. The IRS is watching. As a state officer, you may have seen if a chapter hasn't filed, they will receive a letter. You were likely forwarded or copied on it. And so that we do know the IRS is monitoring these very closely. Okay, so what do I need to file? The first and most important thing is the local chapter's EIN. That's an employer's identification number, sometimes referred to as the tax ID number. This virtually is the nonprofit organization's social security number. Every chapter would have one of these, and really how we know this, or the primary reason they know it, this is what registers you as a nonprofit, but to open a bank account, you're going to have an EIN to do it. So sometimes a chapter doesn't know what their EIN is. A good place to look to begin is go to their bank and say what EIN was used to open the account. Now, here's another big problem. If a chapter is revoked and they're trying to collect money or to deposit money on an EIN at a bank or at a bank account, and the EIN is revoked, then the bank could stop accepting their money or not give them access to their money because of their revoked status. So to have access to your money is very important to keep your nonprofit status in good favor. So again, a little bit different from our personal lives. The 990 is due 5 months and 15 days following the end of your fiscal year. So that means most 990s are due either April 15th due May 15th or November 15th. So May 15th and November 15th. So that would be May 15th for a January 1st to December 31st fiscal year, and November 15th for a July 1 to June 30 fiscal year. What if your fiscal year is wrong? So my advice is when you go to file, your e-filer is going to populate what the IRS thinks your fiscal year is going to be. So go with that for now. If that is wrong, then there is a form that you can fill out to have your fiscal year changed. But to get the filing done immediately, just go with the data that's in there that the IRS says is right for your organization. And again, for the 990 EZ and for Form 9 and the full 990, you'll need some accounting information to complete that form. We covered this. So most PTA groups will have a November 15th and May 15th filing date. File 990 as an entity, May 15th is the day that the majority of the groups that use our website to file. So I'd probably say 70% file have a May 15th due date, and the other have a November 15th due date. Again, the consequences for not filing are if you don't file for 3 years in a row, you risk rejection, revocation of your nonprofit status. You'll receive a letter from the IRS. They'll say you're revoked. But they will also give you an opportunity if you've just recently filed or have proof of those filings, you'll be able to write back and say that you filed recently and that you should not be revoked. When you are revoked, if you are revoked, you basically become a for-profit business. So that means every dollar that's brought in to the PTA could be taxed at the business level, which is not a position that you want to be in. There are penalties and interest due. So not a good situation. In our experience, chapters that get revoked are usually the underperforming chapters that are probably in debt or don't have a lot of good leadership or good corporate organization around it. So that's just going to dig them deeper in their hole that they're in. And again, like I said earlier, excuse me, we don't want the parent organization or the state PTA at risk of putting its corporate health in jeopardy because of the rogue chapters that it has that are not in good standing. So our advice for you as a state officer, if you are new to this or if you are examining the tax situation of your local chapters, what are some easy things that you can implement that you can do to get started? So the first is to track the status of all of your chapters. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that there's probably at least half, if not more, are doing the right thing and filing regularly and in good standing. But then develop a plan of attack to number one, how do we get the revoked chapters reinstated? Or if there are chapters that are 2 years or 3 years behind, how do we get them up to speed so they don't fall into a possible revocation category? The second is to use opportunities like this, the national convention or the state convention, your annual newsletters, email reminders, really to educate the local officers and advisors of the PTA, the nonprofit tax obligations and what they have to do. Again, some state PTAs have local chapters that maybe have a July 1 fiscal year start or a January 1 fiscal year start. Some have undertaken a path that they want to standardize all of that. So all of their local chapters are on the same schedule. So you can work with the IRS to standardize the fiscal years for all chapters. And again, like I said earlier, to make this a corporate priority. If you don't care about it and make it a big deal at the state level, then it's going to be hard for the local leaders to make it a big priority in their operations. So what technology is available to help? There is contacting the IRS. That can be done by sending a letter or calling a phone number. Now, COVID has hit the IRS hard. Their employees are working from home. You'll have to remember that we had 3 stimulus payments in the last calendar year that they had to process. So they are stretched thin. They have not hired new employees in years, and they will not hire further new employees. So it's hard to get in touch with the IRS, but it can be done. Most success is calling them, but it's usually a 30-minute to 45-minute wait just to speak with someone, and they'll only handle one EIN issue at a time. So if you have 3 chapters that are revoked, they'll help you with the first one, and you're gonna have to call back and wait to talk about the second one. They do have a great website, and it's called EO Select Check. You could Google that, and that will take you to the website. And that is where you can enter an EIN at this website, and it will show you their recent filings. It will show you if they're revoked. It will show you the revocation letter. But that's a one-by-one process. So if you are a big state that has 1,000 PTAs or more, then imagine the process of doing that. There's a website called GuideStar that again can help a little bit, but again, it's one by one, and they oftentimes they rely on information either submitted by the organization or the IRS. So their record of your most recent filing could be delayed too, and they don't always have great information on 990N groups. The IRS Business Master File is really is a gigantic Excel spreadsheet. So you have access to that, but you really need to be an Excel pro to find your way through it. It's actually what the File990.org dashboard runs it, but it's based on where it gets its information. So that is good, but it's only as good as the information as often as the IRS publishes it. And we found during busy filing seasons that can be, the information can lag a week to two weeks of it publishing its updated information. There's a way to break it down by states, but still it's a big file and you must go one by one to find it. So part of the genesis of File990.org was we had nonprofit customers who saw this as a corporate priority or a corporate need, that they needed an easy way for their chapters, for their components to file. And so we developed a way for them to file online. But then they came back and said, that's great, but we need a way to track it. And so we have established a dashboard that with EINs from your local groups, we can make tracking that very easy. So I'm going to close my PowerPoint now and then go to a website. Okay, so this is what a File990 dashboard looks like. And we're using Debs Group Alabama State PTA for it. So you can see we have taken all of our EINs and plugged them in, and this website is going and checking the IRS's master list. And so it's showing me that, the Academy for Academics and Arts, PTA, is current. And then I can go and say, okay, I want to look at the ones that are 3 years old who are at risk. So I can see there's one group that I need to get on right away to file because it's 3 years behind. And I only have two that are 2 years behind. So I, as a state officer, can contact those local groups and say, you really need to file because you're at risk of being revoked. I can also click on this tab over here to look at my revocations. But good thing here is most of these groups that have been revoked have reinstatement dates. So they have done a great job of getting their chapters who have been revoked back to being reinstated. The thing that takes File990 even a step further is when Deb sends me the list to upload to run this dashboard, she gives me the president and treasurer of the local PTA. So when it's time for this group to file, they automatically get an email from File990.org that tells them it's time to file. And that email looks like this. So on the first Monday after their fiscal year flips over, they'll receive an email that says it's time to file, and literally click this link to get started. So when I click this link, it's going to take me to File990.org, and I'm logged in. So let me just try this. So if I wasn't logged in like I am as an administrator, it would take me to a screen where I could say I'm ready to file. So I want to say I'm going to file the 2020 return, and I can go 3 years back. So if a chapter needs to catch up, they can do that. And then I can enter my EIN number. And then I put in my email address. Click Get Started. And it's going to take me to a form, and look at this. So it's pulling information from the IRS master list. So the fiscal year is in here, the address is in here. Again, we don't want to change the address here because it's going to get rejected from the IRS. So if the fiscal year and address need to be changed, there are other forms we fill out to do that manually. We don't mess with it on the File990 filing. So here are the two questions. Has my organization gone out of business? Are my annual receipts less than 50,000 or less? So yes. Then I just fill in the filing officer information. So this normally is the treasurer or the president. So they fill in their information here. So let me just try to auto-fill it in here for us. So I have that all filled in. Then I would hit proceed to payment. So normally a organization that's not a File990 partner would have a filing fee to pay, but the state PTA has a special deal with us. So it is paid for by the state PTA. So it has been submitted and is waiting IRS approvals. This group had already filed, so this will be rejected because they've already filed, but it's a good example of what the system can do. So again, this process makes it so easy for your chapters to file. It makes it easy for the state PTA to monitor compliance of its local chapters, and it also lets the end user, the state or the local officer, know when it's time to file. So we really achieve those three things, which I think are the biggest concerns when nonprofit groups are looking at their tax compliance. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now, and then we will then have a couple questions that we have prepared. And then if you have questions as you're watching this, then I think we will be answering those live during the real presentation as well. So let me go back to our screen here, and I'll turn it back over to Matthew for questions.
Thank you, JB, and thank you to Deb Stern for joining us today to talk about your experience as treasurer of the Alabama State PTA and your experience with 990 compliance. So a few questions for you, Deb. Let's start with, how should a new state treasurer or president approach local chapter 990 compliance?
Hello, everyone. The first thing I would find out is if your state is a parent group or if you require your local units to be their own nonprofits. For us in Alabama, we are a parent group with the subordinates under us, which is a beautiful thing for our local units that may not have a lot of income. We're able to get an EIN for them at no cost to them, so they can be a nonprofit. If you are a parent organization, find out if the mandatory annual update was sent to the IRS. If it was, then you can take that list that was sent the previous year and go through the IRS search to see if the updates were made. For me, when I came on board, we didn't have a handle on where our units were at. We didn't know who is active, inactive, who is revoked. We were in constant reactive mode. And I just really need to be in a proactive mode.
And Deb, I think it's important to show there as well that the IRS used to, from January to March, send an old dot matrix like printout to every parent org, and it would show its child organizations, so local chapters, and you could cross out the ones that had closed or been disbanded, and then handwrite the EIN and name of the new groups, and the IRS would take that, and then by you identifying who the new groups were, that would allow them, the EIN, to be able to file a return and the IRS to accept it. I've been told that they're not going to automatically send those lists anymore. So the state PTA or the state treasurer must have a reminder that, once a year they need to send those EINs and names to the IRS, so it's added to their as child groups to their parent org.
Yeah, that's correct. Starting January 1st, 2019, they stopped sending these lists, and that as the state treasurer. So instead of having that nice little list that the IRS could send me showing me what they think they had on file for us, and it was a starting point for me, I pretty much just had to start all over myself to start compiling lists.
Deb, you've touched on this a little bit. I wonder if we could go into a little more detail. How different is local unit compliance today versus where it was when you began your tenure as state treasurer, and how did you get there?
So this is my second term of a two-year term. So the first year I spent, of course, we did not have File 990 yet, but I received an Access database spreadsheet that had 374 units on it. There were units on there that were inactive, ones that have turned to PTOs, revoked units, and we just didn't have a hold on it. So I spent the first year going through those units, and I have honed it down to we're at about 230 units that are either active or potential for being active, meaning they want to be a PTA, but they may have been revoked, or they are just coming back online as a PTA. So we got that down to a manageable, good number of units, whereas the next year I could reach out to JB and go, we're ready to move forward and start getting everybody compliant. So before then, I couldn't tell you how many were not being compliant. I lived in the IRS search database, constantly looking up units, seeing where they were at. And so once we had a good handle on who our active units really were, then we could move to the next step. And we still have a ways to go. This is a work in process. This is not done. We are continuing to look at those units like JB showed you, that revoked list. There are still 2 units that I have that are not showing up at all that I have sent correspondence to. So we are constantly trying to get this to the most perfect position of getting 100% compliance. And I did want to also mention a couple of those schools that are showing that they're 2 or 3 years behind. They may have sent EZs to the IRS, the hard copy form, and they may not be showing up yet. So that kind of puts us in a bad spot as well. But I will say the IRS, once there's something that has been identified as a problem, that correspondence was sent and was not recognized by them, they have been removing fees or whatever has come about of that miscommunication.
And how did you go about establishing a relationship or a contact with the IRS?
So I wrote on my notes, I can't say I really have a relationship with them. If I do, it's not even a love-hate relationship. I've found out you need to call early in the morning. You need to be prepared to be on hold. So have a speakerphone where you can sit and work on other items. I've spent up to 3 hours on hold to ask about one EIN. I know that going into it, that's how it's going to be. Sometimes if you call in the afternoon, the recording's just going to tell you they are no longer accepting any more calls. So if you're going to call for one unit, you better be ready to wait and know what you're asking for so you're ready. Otherwise, I've been real successful with correspondence, drafting a letter explaining these 5 units need to be added with all of their information. I send it registered mail and I fax it. Things are supposed to be done, I want to say a 6-week period, I don't remember, but it is taking months for things to process through. And I will say that a majority of the correspondence that I have sent through has been recognized and fixed. I just have to be patient. And so it's been a real struggle with not only being a new treasurer, but also time of COVID when things are closed down and they're at low staff. But I just persevere on, get my correspondence in, and it's been working.
That's great. Could you talk a little bit about what you find to be the most effective way to ensure 990 compliance with your units?
By giving JB the list of the point of contacts for the different units, and what we decided to do in Alabama is to have the primary be the council treasurer. We have several councils here, and then we can do either the local treasurer or president, so that they are getting those reminders. When all else fails, and I've got people that are just uncomfortable doing that, I ask them to give me, maybe their budget versus actual, or their final annual report. So I feel comfortable going ahead and filing their 990 in for them. That's the $50,000 or less. I won't file anybody's 990 EZ. I'm not an accountant. I have no accounting experience.
I think if you read Debs Bio, you'll see, I think one of the points that she wanted to make was she's a nurse by trade and a career Navy woman. So she's not an accountant, doesn't have a finance background, but you can see she cut her teeth at the local level, being a local PTA officer, and then now a state PTA officer. So you don't need to be a tax expert for it, but I hope that the knowledge and some education we've given you today helps you feel a lot more comfortable with it, with the working both at the state level and local level with taxes.
Yeah, so I will go ahead and file those 990 postcards or ins for them. It's very quick and easy to do. And I also think that it's a wonderful thing that our state has decided to partner with 990 to offer the 990 EZs for the units that it pertains to at no cost to them.
So aside from partnering with File990.org, are there other technologies that you've adopted that you found helpful?
Well, we are one of the many states that use MemberHub as our membership software. So that is our main database for our active units. So we use that, and then File990, and then I'm in the IRS website all the time, searching for units. I've been finding units that, as I go through some of the older EINs of units that are still using the PTA name, still filing a 990, and not sending us any membership dues or participating with our state organization at all. And so it helps me to have all these tools at my fingertips to start searching people and see where they stand.
And to an incoming state treasurer or president, what advice would you give them as it relates to 990 compliance?
It was very important to me once I understood. Of course, I understood what a local treasurer's responsibilities are. I even understood at a council level, I was the treasurer of our council, and I would follow up with our local units in the Huntsville area where they stood with their 990s and made sure they got filed every year. But once I got up to the state level and I saw that we are the parent organization, it's just important, bottom line, that 990s get filed and these units stay in good standing with the IRS. When you're a parent organization like we are, a personal Social Security number is attached to that group exemption, and my Social Security number is attached to that group exemption. So it's very important to make sure that we have units out there in good standing with their nonprofit federal tax exempt status. Otherwise, if they're taking in income and they are not, it's just wrong and illegal. So I don't like any of that kind of business going on, and I make it a priority.
Absolutely. On that note, and this is our last questions for you, as a state PTA officer, where should IRS compliance rank in our priorities?
I feel that membership dues and compliance are equally important at the very top of the list. All the other good standing components, they can be addressed in a more leisurely time. But these two items, since we are a membership-based organization, it's important that they're submitting membership dues. And along with that goes, they need to be recognized as a nonprofit tax-exempt organization.
Great. Well, Matthew, those were great questions. And Deb, I imagine if I was a local officer that this would be a big help for me. So we want to thank everyone for joining us today. You'll have our contact information in the conference program. So if you have any questions or want to reach out to us, that is great. The File990 website is www.file990.org. And my email address, if you want more information, is JB, the letter J and the letter B, .goll at file990.org. And we can do a personalized demo of our system and show you how it works in more detail. So thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to any more questions that you may have for us.